Okay, well, welcome. Good afternoon, everyone from Geneva. And airport slots is going to be our next topic. It's been a continuing issue of considerable importance for airlines during the pandemic crisis. And to explain why this is the case, we have not one but two experts to talk to you today on the issue of slots. Dimiter Zahariev is a senior manager worldwide airport slots at IATA. And Rikke Christensen is Vice President of Networks, Alliances and Commercial Planning at Virgin Atlantic and is also, importantly, Chair of the IATA Slot Policy Working Group. So she will be joining us shortly to have a discussion with Dimiter on this issue. But in the meantime, I'm going to invite Dimiter to say a few words and give a short presentation on the background to this issue. So thank you very much, Dimiter. Take it away.
Thanks, Chris, and good day from me to all of you, wherever in the world you are right now. I would like to set the scene for our conversation with Rikke Christensen with a brief overview of the situation globally and the recovery trends we are seeing with regards to passengers actually getting back in the skies. So first of all, I would like to move to some of the latest data that IATA announced just yesterday on the traffic situation or on the RPKs, the revenue passenger kilometers, as we call them. And it's really what we are seeing is that domestic and international recovery is varying. Unfortunately, global recovery is worse than expected, and you can see that only freight has recovered above 2019 levels. Domestic rebound in the first months of this summer schedules shows levels reaching about 80% of 2019 levels, and that is mainly driven by large domestic markets such as US and China. But this is not necessarily the case elsewhere. As you know, there are airlines which have absolutely no domestic market, and that is a worry. But the most important international segment is stagnant. As you can see, it's hovering around just 20% of 2019 levels. And actually, there is no improvement, or we are not seeing any long-term improvement since October last year. This is mainly underlined by the continued travel restrictions and very complex sanitary measures and entry rules. These all impact consumer confidence, and they are still out there today. Now, moving on to the next point that I would like to make is that restoring global connectivity is very important, and it relies on slots being preserved at congested airports. So now you may ask why. Let me give you an overview. Slot-coordinated airports are far more exposed to international traffic, and the recovery there is, as you see, is mainly coming from domestic markets this year. But that is only 28% of those domestic flights that depart from level 3 airports. Or put it in another way, level 3 airports or the slot-coordinated airports serve over 60% of global international flights. And these congested airports are actually, they're the backbone to international connectivity and networks. And those hub networks rely on precise slot times at those airports. Our forecast is that international traffic may only recover to 32% of 2019 levels in the second half of 2021. And that is the important point here, that level 3 airports play a very significant part of the recovery. Now, moving on next, I would like just to focus for a minute on the recovery trends in Europe, for example, which is one of the most severely affected regions in the world in terms of traffic recovery. And if we can move on to the next slide, please, to see those figures and those trends. Looking at the winter demand for 2021 shows that despite of the increase in summer we're seeing now with summer holidays, there is not going to be there is not expected to be a good recovery. I think we have to just go one slide back, please, so you can see the trends. Thank you very much. So why we are seeing these low numbers in Europe? Well, forward bookings are actually lower now for the winter season than they were at this point last year. And this is really worrying because last year we had a period for which a full slot waiver or waiver from the slot rules were granted, and that responded to these very low numbers. If we look into more detail, the forward bookings for international long-haul travel from the European Union for the period October-December are only 18 to 25% of the 2019 levels still, and worryingly, that is lower than they were in the same period last year, which was about 30% of 2019 levels. This just shows that continued flexibility on slot rules is actually really vital. Now, let's look why airlines really need flexibility, and that is our next slide. Passenger demand has really changed in the last 2 years. And because of that change in demand, airlines had to adjust their schedules really very quickly where passengers can actually fly. The travel restrictions and the sanitary bans have actually focused passengers on new routes or alternative routes to what has been existing so far. And the flexible slot routes provided by the regulators so far has enabled this pattern, allowing airlines to very quickly switch routes and respond to demand. We see on the graph how in 2020 and 2021, the number of newly opened routes by low-cost carriers is almost equal to the number of dropped routes. This just shows that without flexibility, this would have not been possible. But the situation we see today, the picture we see today is temporary. Networks will be restored to their previous levels, and global connectivity and schedules will return eventually as soon as possible. But the industry needs these flexible slot rules to be extended globally into the winter, as we see that it's going to be a very weak and unpredictable season. And now finally, let's have a look at one example of how travel restrictions, despite the vaccinations, impact consumer confidence. And this is just one of the many examples you probably know and you're aware of, and as we speak today, there are many examples of that. The UK-Portugal situation that we have seen just this summer, where the demand quickly spiked with travel being allowed, and then just 2 weeks after, there was an even bigger slump as a result of the restrictions being reimposed. And the unpredictable and volatile demand situation is reflective of these stop-start restrictions. And airlines have very little time to anticipate these changes and reopenings. There is very little time to reschedule. Imagine a fleet of 100, 200 aircraft, airline, pilot, crew, all that needs time to be put back in action. And airlines need maximum flexibility in slot management to facilitate this. And now I would like to turn to Rikke and start our conversation with her by asking if you can, Rikke, briefly explain what were the short-term and the long-term actions Virgin Atlantic has actually undertaken in this crisis. think you have...
Rikke, you're on mute, please. I fear you're still on mute. No.
Thank you. Now I can unmute. I couldn't unmute.
Yes, we can hear you now. Thanks, Rikke.
Perfect. Thank you. And thank you so much for letting me be here. And Dimiter, thank you also for the good introduction. It's really, really a good discussion we're going to have here. I'm looking forward to share a little bit what we've done at Virgin. Quickly, just briefly about what Virgin, we are long-haul carry only, meaning we fly only wide bodies. We have no domestic service. We have 70% pre-COVID of our capacity to the US. And during the pandemic, we've had to take drastic steps, both on an overall company level, but also on a network level, how we plan our route network. We have consolidated our flying into London Heathrow and Manchester. We have resized our fleet and retired our fleet. We have reduced staffing to up to 47%. And then, of course, the tremendous amount of changes we've done in the network. Started with, first of all, Shanghai being suspended, 1st of February 2020. And then during March and April 20, we suspended 25 routes in just 11 days. And from 10th of April 20 to 20th of July 20, we didn't operate any passenger flights at all. And we had to rebuild our entire operation to serve cargo-only routes with passenger aircrafts. And cargo has really been essential for us during this crisis. We have started 14 new cargo-only routes. Some of these are short-haul, some are long-haul, creating connectivity with cargo. We have been flying over 4,000 cargo-only routes. And from the passenger side, when we restarted it, we've had to really closely monitor to see where is the demand and trying to actively find opportunities. So we have also had to go into new markets. We have announced 3 new routes to Pakistan. We didn't serve Pakistan before the crisis. We did that in a record speed. And we've also announced new leisure routes. Now, the fact is that all this time, everything is very, very short term. And when you normally look as an airline, and particularly long haul, you look at your booking curve very much, 6 to 9 months out. During this entire pandemic, we are purely looking at the short term. And it's really the next month, the current and next month, that's the full focus. And just to give an idea where we are right now, then in June, for instance, we still have to do schedule changes for 85 to 95% of our flights. They need some kind of change or not. So it has really been during the crisis, grab opportunities, be agile, monitor, but everything is really this and next month. And your booking for the future here that you showed on the slides is really reflective. We see the same on the booking trends. It is short term, meaning you agile need to adjust your flying. We convert between passenger flights, cargo flights, retime. We get restrictions given to us on what timings we can fly, how many frequencies we can fly. So we are really working very, very, very short term.
Thank you, Rikke. It's really interesting how what's the pressure you're seeing, and that you're still working on your schedules to do some last minute changes. With the regulators being relaxed the slot utilization rules and rules and relief was given to airlines. People ask why airlines. What does the slot mean for the airline business, and why such flexibilities is so important for the airlines right now?
Yeah, and I think, really, at the end, airlines fly where customers want to fly. Right now, because there are so many restrictions, there's more restrictions now than there was a year ago. Our customers can't figure out of what are the entry requirements, what are the restrictions, and airlines are trying to, plan where customers and where that demand is. And when kind of the customer confidence is as low as it is right now, it makes it really difficult to plan far out. It is really, and that's why you see all of the bookings coming in very short term. Airlines trying to react. The Portugal example, it's a good example. Trying to react very, very to those where restrictions are being eased. But likewise, when they then get reapplied, it disappears immediately. So you constantly need to plan this. And I think it's important to note that flexibility is needed because we are in such an uncertain world with restrictions. And it's restrictions both from customer, but also operationally. So, for instance, there could be restriction given that our crew cannot enter, requirements to crew, requirements to how many frequencies you can fly per week. There can suddenly come lockdowns. There can be requirements for how many passengers you can carry on board. And everything is very short term, meaning that your slots is what you plan towards. But when you can only plan this and the following 1 to 2 months, you need that full flexibility to be able to be agile to where you see, because airlines do want to fly. We desperately want to fly. We want to get, but we need to, first of all, to get rid of the restrictions before we start talking about getting rid of the slot flexibility, because that's at the end what airlines are trying to do. They're trying to plan where customers want to go. But as long as there's restrictions, customers and ourselves don't know where you can actually fly. The regional differences that's going to be also coming out of this crisis. So very much slot flexibility is absolutely needed. If we want recovery in aviation, we do need that flexibility so we can be agile.
Yeah, I mean, these challenges are incredible, and your ability to respond to where demand is despite those restrictions is actually really a tough job, if I can say so. On the other hand, we are hearing some opposing views from some airlines that because of the slot rules being relaxed, airlines can't get access to airports, and some regulators are being reluctant to extend those slot relief measures, despite all the restrictions and the travel bans still existing. But can you share what is actually happening? Is it really a problem of accessing those congested airports right now, knowing that they may be not so busy at the moment?
So you're absolutely right. There's some noise around being able to access airports. I think it's important to, first of all, say right now, new entrants can get access. We have many examples of this. Heathrow, being one of the most slot-constrained airports in the world, has got several new entrants who's gotten access. Both long-haul carriers, regional carriers getting access into Heathrow. New entrants do get, you can say, preferred if that slots become available the following season. And if we look at constrained airports, there's the ultra-constrained and then there's the constrained. And the constrained airports, far majority of these new entrants will get that slot because of that status for the next season. Then there is, of course, the ultra-constrained airports where you can say, yeah, you can fly right now. We might not be able to grant access for that airport next year. But there I also think we need to remember two things. The airport is infrastructure. And they are infrastructure in providing access and connectivity. So both from a hub carrier, it's also infrastructure for the economy, for the country. And starting to, because of the short term, with the demand difference we have, to try to take away that infrastructure can be really hurting in the long run. So there is access right now. Can you get access and be promised access permanently in the ultra-constrained airports next year? Perhaps not, but you will have a preference if that slot is available. And just as a reminder, pre the crisis, it was very normal for a carrier that it could take you years just to get a slot timing changed and get that up, through every day or throughout the year, that changed. So we should neither now just expect that because of the pandemic and restriction given that you can suddenly get access to all of these ultra-constrained airports. But for far majority, they will even get the slots for the next season. So, and there is a mechanism put in place that to make sure, in fairness for the new entrants, you have a higher priority. So in the big picture, I don't see this as there's not an issue. They are giving access both on the short term and also providing a preference in the long term.
Thank you. That's quite interesting. I think you mentioned in the beginning how you actually had to redesign all your network to respond to where the demand is. Starting flights to Pakistan, where you haven't had services before, all the cargo operations, and I suppose that was also the result of the flexible slot rules and the availability of infrastructure at the moment.
Absolutely. I mean, we still do some kind of change to 85 to 95% of every single flight still right now. So if we didn't have that flexibility, the ability we have cargo flights that are connecting to each other. We have passenger and cargo flights where we create connections, where we see demand, how we are shifting it towards the restrictions that are given to us. If we didn't have full flexibility, if there were deadlines set way too early, or if they were giving thresholds to how much we need to fly our slots to keep them, there could be a risk that we will have carriers that needs to start flying empty flights just to protect their slots. And that's not really, first of all, from sustainability, environmentally, what we want as an industry, but it neither serves the recovery of the aviation industry that just to protect slots. So while we are still in this world where there's so many restrictions, slot flexibility is absolutely needed. And we should not talk about removing flexibility before we see the restrictions being moved, because that's the reason that the flexibility is needed. We need to be able to adjust this, all our flying program to that demand coming back. So I also think we don't know now what is coming in the winter season. There will be regional differences in recovery, and that can have an impact also for just the cargo-only operation. There could be regions where you have had cargo-only demand that suddenly is no longer viable, and passenger demand might not have come back because of restrictions. So we are absolutely not in a world right now where we can say that we know exactly what to plan with in the upcoming just winter season. So full flexibility is absolutely needed.
Thank you for that, Rikke, and several important points and key messages, if I can say so. Flexibility, the environmental aspect, the ability to rebuild that global network of connectivity that was existing and that everybody was able to enjoy, businesses, freight, suppliers, and I think that's very important. And now I would like to hand back to Chris for any questions that may have come in the meantime. Thanks.
Thank you, Dimiter, and thank you, Rikke. And yes, absolutely fascinating to hear the airline's perspective and obviously your perspective as well from seeing everything coming through the slot policy working group. So fascinating. And so yes, I would please invite you all to send your questions in to the chat, and we will answer those. So do please, we have 10 minutes, so please ask anything you like. I will start with one that was posed by someone yesterday. I'm afraid I don't know which journalist it was or whether he or she is on the line today. So excuse me if I'm stealing that question, but I think we promised we would answer it. So the question that was asked yesterday was, are the slots rules continuing to cause difficulties financially for airlines? So I'll put that to Rikke first, the financial implications. Thank you.
So it could be if we use flexibility. Right now, the current if you lose flexibility and you have to start flying empty flights, then it will have financial implications. Right now, it doesn't cost you anything to get a slot. But if you need to maintain, to protect that network and infrastructure you have built up as an airline, and we all at one point are going to return to, that's at all our business model, then you will have a few new routes and so forth. But of course, you also have a fleet. You have, the fleet itself, you need to have the slots to operate. So if you lose flexibility in the slot world, that could be that you will see carriers have to start flying empty flights and will have financial implications into it. But otherwise, at least right now, when we have flexibility, at least in the UK, it do not only give us that flexibility, but it's important that it stays that way before we are sure we're coming out of this crisis. And that's particularly, it's really, I'm repeating myself, it is really the restrictions that needs to disappear.
Thank you. Dimiter, anything you'd like to add from what you've seen coming in from our members?
I think the point that Rikke made is quite valid. And of course, as she mentioned, the airlines are in the business of flying aircraft and generate revenue from passengers. And really, it's not in their interest to fly unsustainable aircraft from both environmental and financial point of view. So these flexible throttle rules at the moment help everybody to put their assets where the demand is, which is in the interest of everybody. And if we don't have, the rules that actually provide a sustainable recovery, then it's going to be really difficult for the airlines to get out of this crisis in a healthy situation, in a healthy state.
Thank you. Yes, I think it's an interesting paradox. You made that point there about the environment as well, and for those regulators that have been reluctant to give relief, on the one hand you have those governments who perhaps are giving financial support to airlines and have certainly got environmental requirements for airlines to cut their emissions and so on, and yet they're not seeing, on the other hand, what they could do with the slot regulation to help both of those issues in terms of the financial and environmental sustainability. So thank you. We have a question from Joanna Bailey who says, how long do we think the slot waiver will remain? And until all restrictions are removed, or most restrictions, what is our sort of threshold for keeping the slot waiver in place? Thank you.
Yeah, I can start from that one. It's. I really wish I had the answer, to be honest. But of course, we are right now only seeing the start of the recovery. So saying that the flexibility should be removed right now is too early. We have to remember there are certain countries where the borders still are closed. There are certain countries that don't actually allow you can enter. And so there is definitely a need for still flexibility. Does it have to be until all the restrictions have been removed? Probably not. But we do need to start seeing restrictions start to be removed and then gradually start working back to a new normal. But we are not there yet. I think that's the key thing. The borders between US and Europe and UK is still closed. We still have a lot of restrictions in place, and some of these hardcore restrictions have to be removed first before we start talking about easing the waiver. There could be that you then go to a lower threshold, back to the normal rules with 80-20, but we need to wait a little bit. For how long? Well, hopefully restrictions, the faster they get removed, the faster we also make sure that we can come back to not having any flexibility and waiver.
And that's the challenge, is it not, Dimiter? Because we see that in Europe, right? We in fact have not. We're not expecting a full waiver going forward. We do know that there's likely to be some sort of threshold, and it's really about setting that threshold at a level which is acceptable for that environmental and financial sustainability that we've talked about. So what sort of threshold number do you think the industry needs, and do you think we'll get that?
That's a very valid point here, and I think there are two aspects here. The first one is that the slot relief measures are not something that costs the taxpayers or the government anything. It's something that is, if you like, free of charge, and there is no burden on regulators and taxpayers by providing slot relief. The second point is coming back to what Rikke mentioned. Airlines are in the business of flying aircraft and passengers on board. So the slot relief threshold or whatever it is, 30% or 40 or whatever, it's there to provide the minimum that the airlines need. It's not there to set a barrier that the airlines have to adhere, because even if the threshold is 30% of usage from the normal 80-20, the airlines will fly more if there is demand, because they need to generate the revenues, they need to carry the passengers where the demand is. So the threshold is not to say that the airlines will only fly up to that threshold. And we know, unfortunately, Europe is one of the most affected regions. And unfortunately, we are seeing that in Europe, the trend is to provide less flexibility than in other places in the world, like large markets like Canada, Brazil, New Zealand, Turkey. So it's quite worrying if the EU will set a very high usage threshold. The airlines need maximum flexibility. It should be around the numbers we are seeing, about 30%, or what the projection is for winter. And again, airlines will fly if there is demand. They will not be constrained by a percentage that they have to operate. And another point, coming back to Rikke as well, we are not seeing a sustainable trend of recovery. What we've demonstrated with the Portugal-UK example, this start and stop solution is also in many other places in the world. You know, the Australia-New Zealand travel bubble, it was delayed, then it reopened, then it was closed again, then it reopened. I mean, how the airlines can actually plan in this uncertain environment. And there's so many other examples. And when we probably see a sustainable trend in recovery, then the slot rules should probably go back to normal. But nobody knows yet when will that happen.
And just to follow up with that, Rikke, a follow-up question has come in asking about that threshold point. If it's set at 60%, as the Commission is talking about, what would be the implications for Virgin, and what does that mean for ghost flights and things? So perhaps you could either answer that for Virgin, or indeed more widely how you see that affecting your hat as head of the slot policy working group.
Yeah, so for Virgin itself, it's since UK is not a part of it, and the UK is right now evaluating their slot flexibility for the winter season. But let me talk on behalf of the carriers, and particularly the European carriers. It can put them in a very, very difficult situation also from competitiveness. If they are forced to, they have to operate slots, and their competitors around the world do not and have more flexibility, and forced to fly when there's no demand. And that will, no doubt mean that then, particularly for the bigger hubs, where you are as a carrier and a hub carrier, really trying, your entire network is depending on a feeder in your flights. And to protect that in the long, also post-crisis, that you need to protect those slots will lead to ghost flights. So it will definitely have an implication for the Europe and make it more difficult for them also to compete, because they need to really, to maintain their slots, fly more ghost flights. So not what we want environmentally, but definitely not what airlines need right now after being in such a crisis for 16 months. It's not what they need.
Thank you. I think we're going to have to leave it there because we're on time. So thank you very much indeed, Rikke, Christensen, Dimiter, Zahariev for your fascinating insights and those really important messages. Thank you to the questions that have come in, and thank you for your time. We are going to move on now. I'm going to hand over back to my colleague Perry Flint, who's going to talk about the new safety strategy with Mark Searle. So back to you, Perry. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chris. And as you mentioned, yes, we're going to